The champagne glasses clinked like tiny bells across the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Anchorage Hotel. Alaska's winter wind howled outside, but inside, everything was warm, golden, and expensive. The engagement party for Choi Min-suk and Brielle Ellis was the most talked-about event in Anchorage that season. Crystal chandeliers threw soft light across the room. White roses were arranged in tall vases at every corner. A string quartet played in the far end of the hall while waiters in black and white moved silently through the crowd like well-trained ghosts. Brielle stood near the center of the room in a deep burgundy gown that hugged every curve of her body like it was made specifically for her, because it was. Her natural hair was pinned up with a few curls falling softly around her face. Her skin glowed under the chandelier light, smooth and rich like dark honey. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people forget what they were saying. She was not just beautiful. She was brilliant. Brielle Ellis was one of the most respected environmental law attorneys in Alaska. She had stood in federal courtrooms and made judges rethink their positions. She was 32 years old, sharp as a blade, and she did not apologize for any of it. Brielle lifts her champagne glass slightly and smiles across the room at Min-suk. Choi Min-suk stood across the room talking to a group of business associates. He was tall for a Korean man. He owned 3 tech companies in the United States, 2 in South Korea, and a shipping firm that connected both continents. When their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, something passed between them. Something private. Something that had nothing to do with the champagne or the string quartet or the 200 guests watching them. Min-suk excused himself from the group and walked toward her. He approaches her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You look like you own this room," he said quietly, his accent light but present. Brielle tilted her head. "I look like I own you," she said with a small smile. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that surprised even him. "Yes," he said softly. "You do." The crowd around them applauded gently as someone tapped a glass and announced the happy couple. Cameras flashed. People smiled. Everything looked perfect. But not everyone in that room was smiling. 3 weeks before the engagement party, Min-suk had called his father in Seoul. "Father, I want you to meet Brielle. Formally. I want your blessing before we announce anything." The phone had gone quiet for a long moment. Min-suk presses the phone closer to his ear, waiting. His father, Choi Byung-ho, was 71 years old. He had built the original Choi family fortune from nothing, literally from nothing. He had started as a young man collecting scrap metal on the streets of Busan. He had recycled, resold, borrowed, and clawed his way up until he had enough to start a small electronics repair shop. That shop became a factory. That factory became an empire. By the time Min-suk was born, they were already rich. But Byung-ho never forgot the streets. He also never forgot the woman who had broken his heart when he had nothing. A woman who had smiled at him when he had money and walked away when he did not. He had loved her deeply. And she had taught him the most painful lesson of his life, that some people only love the version of you that serves them. He had married Min-suk's mother later. A quiet, loyal woman who had seen him at his worst and stayed. She passed away 6 years ago, and Byung-ho had never been the same. Now his son was engaged to an American woman he had never met. "What kind of woman is she?" Byung-ho had asked on the phone. "She is strong, father. Intelligent. She is an attorney. That tells me her profession." I asked what kind of woman she is. Min-suk had paused. "I believe she is the right one." "Believing is not knowing," Byung-ho said quietly. "I will come." Min-suk did not expect his father to arrive in Alaska like a ghost. No announcement. No hotel booking that Min-suk knew about. No call saying, "I have landed." Nothing. Byung-ho arrived 3 days after the engagement party, alone, dressed in old clothes, worn brown jacket, faded trousers, a cart with some collected recyclables, and he checked into a small motel on the edge of Anchorage's Lower East Side under a fake name. He did not go to see his son. He went to find the woman his son loved. Byung-ho pulls the cart slowly down the sidewalk near Brielle's office building, his eyes sharp and observant beneath his old cap. He knew Brielle's office address. He had researched her thoroughly before leaving Seoul. He knew where she worked. He knew the hours she kept. He knew the neighborhood she lived in. He knew enough. What he did not know was who she was when no one important was watching. That was what he came to find out. It was a Tuesday morning, just past 7, when Brielle walked out of her building with a coffee in one hand and her case files tucked under her arm. The Anchorage morning was brutal, 22 degrees with a wind that cut through layers like a knife through paper. She was moving fast, heels clicking on the frozen pavement, her mind already on the deposition she had at 9. She almost walked past him. Brielle stopped suddenly, looking down. An old man had slipped near the edge of the sidewalk. His cart had tipped sideways, sending crushed cans and flattened cardboard scattering across the icy pavement. He was on one knee, struggling to get up, his old gloved hands pressing against the ground. Brielle stopped. She looked at him for exactly 1 second, then she set her coffee and files on top of a nearby mailbox, walked over, and crouched down beside him. "Sir, are you hurt?" she asked, her voice direct but not cold. She reaches out and steadies his arm. I am fine, he muttered, waving her off in slightly accented English. "You don't look fine," she said. She was already picking up the cans that had rolled near her feet. The old man looked at her. She was picking up his junk. Without being asked. In a burgundy wool coat and heels on a frozen sidewalk. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said simply, and kept picking them up. She stacks the flattened cardboard back onto the cart neatly and helps him to his feet. "Thank you," he said, studying her face carefully. "Are you sure you're okay? Do you need me to call someone?" No. I manage alone." She looked at him for a moment, really looked at him. His eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone who appeared as rough as he looked. But she did not say anything about that. It was not her business. "There is a warming shelter 2 blocks west on Ingra Street," she said. "They open at 8. They also serve breakfast." He blinked. "Thank you," he said again. She picked up her coffee and her files, nodded once, and walked on. Byung-ho stood on the sidewalk and watched her go. He is very still, his expression unreadable. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Each morning at the same time, he positioned himself somewhere near her routine. The coffee shop she stopped at on 4th Avenue. The parking lot behind her office. The path she took when she walked to the courthouse. He was not following her to frighten her. He was observing. The way a man who had been deceived before observes. Carefully. Without emotion getting in the way. On the 4th day, she spotted him outside the coffee shop. Brielle pauses mid-step, then walks toward him. "You again," she said. He looked up from the bench where he sat. "You remember me. You're hard to forget," she said, which was not unkind, it was just honest. "Are you eating?" "I am resting." She looked at him for a moment, then turned and went inside the coffee shop. She came back out 5 minutes later with a paper bag and a hot cup. She hands it to him without ceremony. "Oatmeal and coffee," she said. "It's too cold to sit on a metal bench without something warm in you." "You don't know me," he said. "I don't need to know you to know that," she said. He took the bag slowly. "What is your name?" he asked. "Brielle," she said. "Brielle," he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "Yours." He paused. "Ben," he said. She did not push. She simply said, "Stay warm, Ben," and walked away again. Byung-ho watches her go, the paper bag warm in his hands, something shifting very slowly behind his eyes. By the end of the first week, Byung-ho had formed a clear picture in his mind, but he was not done. Observing a person in passing was one thing. Testing them under pressure was another. He had learned that lesson the hard way decades ago. So he came back. This time with a different approach. It was a Friday afternoon. Brielle was leaving the courthouse after a 3-hour hearing that had not gone the way she wanted. She had lost a preliminary motion in a case that mattered to her deeply, an indigenous Alaskan community fighting a pipeline corporation that was threatening their water supply. It was not over, but the loss stung. She walked out into the cold afternoon looking like someone who was holding herself together through pure discipline. She stops when she sees Byung-ho sitting on the courthouse steps. He was not collecting anything today. He just sat there, cap in hand, looking uncertain. Like a man who needed something, but did not know how to ask. Brielle stopped beside him. "Ben." He looked up. "Miss Brielle." "I am sorry too, I did not know where else to go." She sat down beside him on the cold stone steps without hesitation. "Talk to me," she said. "I received a letter," he said carefully, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. "From the building where I rent a room." They say I must leave by end of next week. Something about the owner selling the property. Brielle took the letter and read it quickly. Her eyes moved fast and precise. The lawyer in her was already working. This notice period is not legal, she said flatly. In Alaska, they must give you at least 30 days written notice for a no-fault eviction. This gives you 11 days. That is a violation. He watched her carefully. What can I do? He asked. Brielle is already pulling out her phone. You don't have to do anything yet. Do you have a copy of your rental agreement? I can get one. Get one. Photograph it and send it to this number. She took a business card from her coat pocket and handed it to him. I will have someone from my office send the landlord a formal response letter. You will not be paying for this. Don't worry about that. He stared at the card in his hand. Brielle Ellis, environmental and civil rights attorney. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. She looked at him directly. Because it's wrong. And because I can help. Those two reasons are enough. A long beat of silence between them. You're a lawyer? He asked, his voice careful. Yes. A busy one? Very. And you will spend time on an old man's small problem. It's not a small problem to you, she said simply. Byung-ho was quiet for a long time. The cold air moved between them. Up on the courthouse steps, with the gray Alaska sky above them, something was happening that he had not fully prepared himself for. He had come to test her. He had not expected to be moved by her. Min-suk called Brielle that same Friday evening. How was your day? He asked. Long, she said. We lost the preliminary motion on the pipeline case. I'm sorry. His voice was genuine. Are you okay? I will be. I don't lose gracefully, but I lose forward. He smiled on his end of the line. That is one of the things Min-suk, she interrupted gently. Has your father said anything about coming to Anchorage? You mentioned he wanted to meet me before the wedding. A pause. Min-suk sits forward slightly in his chair. He said he would come when he was ready. Why? No reason, she said. Just wondering. She did not tell him about the old man named Ben. It felt like something private, something that belonged to the cold sidewalks and courthouse steps and did not need to be brought into the warm space of their relationship yet. She could not explain why. On Monday morning, Byung-ho was back near the coffee shop on 4th Avenue. But this time, he was not alone. He had called a man, an associate he trusted, and asked him to do something specific. The man had arrived in Anchorage quietly and had approached Brielle's law office the previous day posing as a potential client. He had left a small envelope with the receptionist. Inside the envelope was cash, a significant amount, and a handwritten note asking Brielle to drop the pipeline case and focus only on paying clients. The note was not signed. It was a test of a different kind. Byung-ho sat on his bench and waited. He did not have to wait long. Brielle walks out of her office building at exactly 8:45, the envelope in her hand. She walked directly to the nearest trash can on the sidewalk and dropped the envelope in. She did not hesitate, did not count the money, did not look around to see if anyone was watching. She just threw it away and walked on to her car. Byung-ho watches from across the street, completely still. His chest did something then. Something complicated. Something that had nothing to do with business or strategy. He stood up slowly and began walking in her direction. Miss Brielle, he called. She turned, surprised to see him. Ben, you're out early. I wanted to say thank you, he said. The letter worked. The landlord has agreed to the 30 days. She nodded. Good. Hold on to that agreement in writing. I will. He fell into step beside her slowly. Can I walk with you a little? She glanced at him. I'm heading to the parking lot. Then to the parking lot, he said. They walked in silence for a moment. The morning was gray and still. Their breath came out in small visible clouds. Can I ask you something personal? He said. You can ask. I might not answer. Fair. He looked at the ground as he walked. Do you believe a person can change? Someone who made very bad choices when they were young. Brielle glanced at him sideways. I believe most people who want to change can. The ones who don't want to, they're a different story. What if the person hurt someone they loved? Because they were afraid. She was quiet for a moment. Fear makes people do terrible things, she said carefully. But it doesn't make the terrible things okay. The question is whether they did the work to understand what they did and why. Whether they took responsibility without making excuses. And if they did all that, Then they deserve the chance to build something better. She paused. Who are we talking about, Ben? He was quiet. Someone I know, he said finally. They reached the parking lot. Brielle stops beside her car and turns to look at him fully. He was already looking at her. And for a moment, the sharp elderly eyes under the old cap looked like something far beyond what his clothes suggested. Brielle tilted her head slightly. Ben, she said slowly. Who are you? He held her gaze. Someone who needed to know the truth about you, he said quietly. A long silence stretched between them. The wind moved through the parking lot. Somewhere in the distance, a car started. And do you? She asked. He nodded slowly. I think I am beginning to. That evening, Byung-ho called his son. Min-suk answers on the second ring. Father? Where are you calling from? The number is American. I am in Anchorage, Byung-ho said. A stunned silence. Your father, you're here? Why didn't you tell me? I would have. I did not want you to prepare anything, Byung-ho said. I came to see for myself. Min-suk's voice went very quiet. What does that mean? What did you do? I found your Brielle, the old man said simply. Father. Sit down, Min-suk. His voice was calm. I am not calling to fight. I am calling because you deserve to know what I found. Min-suk sat down. His hands were tight on the phone. She helped an old junk collector she had never met, Byung-ho said. Not once. Multiple times. And when someone tried to pay her to abandon people who needed her, she threw the money away without a second thought. Min-suk closed his eyes. Father, you tested her. Yes, Byung-ho said, without apology. I did. That is not right. She is not a business transaction. You cannot. Min-suk. His father's voice cut gently but firmly through his anger. I tested her because I love you. Because I've watched what happens when a person chooses wrong. I chose wrong once. And it cost me years. I did not want that for you. Silence. Min-suk presses his hand to his forehead. And what did you find? He asked, his voice quieter now. I found a woman who is real, Byung-ho said. Who does not perform goodness? Who does not calculate it? It simply lives in her. A pause. She is the kind of woman your mother was. Min-suk did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was unsteady. You should have told me you were coming. Yes, his father said. I should have. I am sorry for that. Another long silence. Does she know who you are? Min-suk asked. She is beginning to suspect something, Byung-ho said. She is very perceptive, your Brielle. I think she already knows I am not simply an old collector. You need to tell her, Min-suk said. Before I do. She deserves to hear it from you. Byung-ho nods slowly to himself in the quiet motel room. I know, he said. I will. He went to her office the next morning. Not with a cart. Not with old clothes. He arrived in a dark coat, clean and upright, and he asked the receptionist if Miss Ellis was available. The receptionist came back and said, she says she will see you. But she already knows you're not a junk collector. Byung-ho allows a small, surprised smile. He walked into her office. Brielle was standing behind her desk, watching him come in. She did not look angry. She looked like a woman who had already run the situation through her mind and come out the other side of it. Sit down, she said. Not unkindly, but firmly. He sat. A long beat of silence. Brielle studies him. Choi Byung-ho, she said. He nodded once. Min-suk's father. Yes. You came here to test me, she said. Yes. Dressed as a junk collector. Yes. Pretending to need help. The rental letter was arranged, he said. The rest sitting in the cold, the slipping on the ice that first morning, that was real. I am 71 with bad knees. He paused. But yes, I came with a purpose. She looked at him steadily. Why? He met her eyes. Because my son loves you. And I have seen what it looks like when a man loves someone who does not deserve it. I have lived that. I did not want that life for him. Brielle was quiet. What happened to you? She asked. He looked slightly surprised by the question. He takes a slow breath. When I was young and had nothing, he said, I loved a woman. She was beautiful and I believed she loved me too. But when I lost everything in a bad investment, when I went back to collecting scrap metal to survive, she left. She did not say goodbye. She did not explain. She simply was no longer there. He paused. I built myself back up. I married a good woman later. but the scar from the first one never fully left. And I told myself, if I ever had a son who wanted to marry, I would make sure the woman he chose was the kind who stayed when it was difficult. Not just when it was easy. Brielle was very still. Her expression does not crack, but something behind her eyes shifts. "So you came here as a struggling old man," she said slowly. "To see what I would do." "Yes." "And the envelope with money, asking me to drop my case." He nodded. She exhaled through her nose. "Mr. Choi," she said carefully, "I understand why you did it. I do not agree with how you did it. And I will tell you that plainly because I think you are a man who respects plain speaking." He nodded again. "I am. What you did was a violation of my dignity," she said, her voice steady and controlled. "You came into my life under false pretenses. You allowed me to show you compassion while you were secretly evaluating me like a piece of property your son was considering purchasing." She leaned forward slightly. "I am not an asset to be assessed. I am a person. And I have spent my entire career fighting for people whose dignity was treated as if it did not matter. I will not accept that treatment from anyone, including the father of the man I love." The room was very quiet. Byung-ho does not look away. "You are right," he said. "Everything you said is right." She blinked. She had expected resistance. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A real one. Not an explanation dressed as an apology. What I did was wrong. I decided that my fear, my past, gave me the right to judge you without your knowledge. It did not. And I am sorry." Brielle looked at him for a long moment. "Why did you start collecting junk?" she asked. "Specifically, why that disguise?" He looked down at his hands briefly. "It is what I was," he said quietly. "When I was at my lowest. I know how people treat someone who looks like that. I know how invisible you become. I know what it costs a person, whether it costs them nothing at all, to stop and see you as a human being." Something passes across Brielle's face. "That's why it mattered," she said. It was not a question. "That is why it mattered," he confirmed. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Brielle stood up and walked around her desk. She did not extend her hand to shake. She stood in front of him and looked at him the way someone looks at another person when they are deciding something important. "I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Choi," she said. "And I need you to hear it as Min-suk's father, not as a man running a test." He looked up at her. "I grew up with very little," she said. "My mother worked 2 jobs in a city that did not always want to see her. I have been in rooms where I was the only one who looked like me, and I have been told in 100 quiet ways that I did not belong there. I became a lawyer because I believed that the law could be a shield for people who had nothing else." She paused. "I have never stopped helping people who could not pay me because I remember what it felt like to watch my mother need help and have no one show up. That is not performance. That is not strategy. It is who I am." Byung-ho was very still. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes grow slightly bright. "I know," he said softly. "I saw it." "Then understand this," she continued. "I am not marrying your son to access his money. I am not marrying him because it is convenient or strategic. I am marrying him because he is the first person who ever made me feel like my intensity was not too much. Like my edges did not need to be filed down." She met the old man's eyes fully. "But if you cannot respect me, if you will always see me as someone to be tested and watched and suspected, then I need to know that now. Before the wedding. Before this goes further." A long, charged silence. Byung-ho stood up. He was not a tall man, but in that moment he straightened fully, and there was something in him that looked exactly like what he was, a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had survived things most people would not survive, who had never asked anyone for easy. "Miss Ellis," he said formally. "Brielle." His voice shifted slightly. "You just did to me what you do in courtrooms. You made me face what I was avoiding." He paused. "I came here afraid. Afraid for my son. Afraid of history repeating. What I did was wrong. I said that already. But I want to say something else." She waited. "I have met many people in my life," he said. "People who had everything and gave nothing. People who performed kindness for an audience and were different in private. I came here to find who you are in private." He looked at her steadily. "And I found someone who is the same person in every light. That is rare. That is the rarest thing I have ever looked for." The room is very still. "Does this mean you're giving your blessing?" she asked quietly. "It means," he said carefully, "that I am asking if you will forgive an old man who is afraid, and allow him to try to be worthy of the family you and my son are building." Brielle looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted, not softened, exactly, but opened. Like a door that had been bolted suddenly had its key returned to it. "I'll make you a deal, Mr. Choi," she said. "Tell me. You stop testing me. I stop being angry. And we start over properly as family." He looked at her for a moment. Then he extended his hand. She took it. A firm, deliberate handshake. Not warm yet, but real. The beginning of something real. Min-suk arrived at her office 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath. He had called 3 times on the drive over, and she had not answered once. He walked in to find his father and his fiancée sitting on opposite sides of her desk with 2 cups of coffee between them, hers from the office machine, his from a paper bag she had apparently sent her assistant to get. They were talking. Not warmly, not yet. But they were talking. Direct and honest, the way people talk when they have already put the hard things on the table and decided to move past them. Min-suk stands in the doorway, saying nothing. Brielle looked up and saw him. "Your father has terrible taste in disguises," she said. Byung-ho made a sound that was almost a laugh. Min-suk walked in slowly and sat down in the chair beside his father. He looked at the old man first. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am better than okay," Byung-ho said. "Your woman told me the truth to my face. I am not used to that. I find I like it." Min-suk looks at Brielle. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked back at him steadily. "Ask me again after the wedding," she said. He reached across the desk and took her hand. She let him. Byung-ho watches his son hold the hand of the woman he loves, and something in the old man's face, something that has been tight for a very long time, quietly lets go. 3 months later, Brielle Ellis became Brielle Choi in a ceremony at a small venue on the edge of Tinagan Arm, with the snow-covered Chugash Mountains watching from the distance and the gray-blue water of the inlet stretched out below. There was no enormous crowd. No ballroom. No string quartet. There was Min-suk, in a dark suit, unable to stop looking at her. There was Brielle, in ivory, walking in alone the way she had always done, everything on her own terms, at her own pace, with her head completely level. And there was Byung-ho, seated in the front row, upright and still. When Brielle passed him on the way to the altar, she paused. She looks at the old man. He stood up. And he offered her his arm. She looked at him for 1 quiet second. Then she took it. And he walked her the final steps to his son. Min-suk watches his father place Brielle's hand in his. His expression breaks open in a way he does not try to hide. No one in the small gathering fully understood what that moment meant. Only the 3 of them knew. Later, much later, when the night had settled and the guests had gone, Byung-ho sat outside on the venue deck alone, looking out at the dark water. Min-suk came and stood beside him. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing from the beginning?" Min-suk asked. "You could have just come and met her. Properly." Byung-ho was quiet for a moment. "Because people perform when they know they are being watched," he said. "And I needed to see her when she did not know it mattered." Min-suk was quiet. "And what did you see?" he asked. "Even now. Even after everything." Byung-ho thought about a woman crouching on an icy sidewalk to pick up scattered cans without being asked. A woman sitting on cold courthouse steps to listen to a stranger. A woman who threw away a bribe without counting it. A woman who stood across a desk and told an old billionaire that his fear did not give him the right to diminish her, and then offered to begin again anyway. "I saw your mother," Byung-ho said quietly. Min-suk's breath catches. "I saw the same courage. The same honesty. The same way of being in the world that does not shift depending on who is watching." The old man's voice was low and steady. "I spent 40 years missing that. I was not going to let you miss it too." The water moved in the darkness below. Min-suk put his hand briefly on his father's shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They did not need to. If you made it this far, you already know this story was about more than an engagement or a test. It was about a father whose deepest wound became his greatest gift because the love he passed down was not the kind that stays quiet when it is afraid. It is the kind that risks embarrassment, crosses oceans in disguise, and sits on cold benches in an Alaskan winter just to be sure. And it was about a woman who has spent her whole life being underestimated and who, every single time, refuses to shrink. Real love is not just about choosing the right person. It is about being the right person in the small, unseen moments, when no one important is watching, when there is nothing to gain, and it still costs you something. Brielle did not pass Byung-ho's test because she was performing goodness. She passed because she had stopped needing an audience for it a long time ago.